Hey guys, another video for the Myths About Japan playlist. We hear new myths just about every day. There'll be a comment or a question from somebody saying, is it true that, nani nani, is it true that, or stating myths as fact in the comment section. So, for example, one we often get is they'll see a video with some Japanese people in it looking all thin and healthy, or something to do with that will often trigger it, a fashion video with everybody looking all slim and so on, and somebody will throw in, oh, of course it's illegal to be fat in Japan. That's a really common one. We hear that one all the time. We've sort of traced it back. It seems that originally there was some media picked up on a story and ran with that as the heading, as the title, and said, you know, being fat in Japan illegal, or overweight in Japan is illegal. And so in the mainstream media they ran with that some time ago, and a whole heap of people picked up on it, and it's become an internet myth. And it's not true. It's not illegal to be fat or overweight in Japan. What it is there's insurance companies, and the national insurer will either make your policy more expensive if you're overweight, or they might refuse to insure you if you're overweight. So it's similar I think in most countries now. Insurance companies ask if you're a smoker or not, and if you're a cigarette smoker, quite often they'll either charge you more for your premiums, or they'll refuse to insure you. You know, there's some insurance companies who won't insure smokers. It's because they know smokers are at a higher risk of having health problems, and it's the same in Japan with the weight thing. So if you're overweight, they'll charge you more for health insurance or not insure you. But there's no law. You know, if you're a fat person walking down the street in Japan, the cops aren't going to come and go, hey, fatso, come with me. You know, it's not, obviously. And some of these myths are incredible that people actually believe them. You know, that people would actually believe that there'd be a law against being overweight, you know, that you're going to get arrested for being overweight or something. It's quite strange. Particularly, this is the land of sumo wrestlers, you know. So anyway, so yes, that one comes up all the time. It's illegal to be overweight in Japan. No, it isn't. That's a myth. Oh yeah, you must change your name to a Japanese name to become a Japanese citizen. That apparently, I'm not sure about this, but apparently that was true until about 30 years ago, that if you became a Japanese citizen up until 30 years ago, that you had to take a Japanese family name. Apparently, but it's not true now. It's not true now. The only part of it that is true is that, of course, if we live in Japan, even if it's not as a citizen, even if it's just living in Japan long term, we have to be able to write our name in katakana. So quite often on government forms, or even company forms, if we want to buy a phone or a car or a house or something, quite often we have to write our names in katakana. But it's not changing. It's sort of changing. It can be changing your name depending on what your name is. If your name was Banana, it wouldn't really change it, because you're writing katakana, it would be Banana. But if your name is Smith, Sumisu. So sometimes it feels like we're changing our names, and we made a video about this on the how-to playlist. But it's not really. All it's really doing is we can still write our name in our own Romaji, in our own Roman letters, but on some forms we have to write it in katakana. But the actual myth that if you want to become a citizen in Japan, you have to change your name to a Japanese name is not true. It's not true. We hear that one all the time. So a lot of these myths, we hear a lot of myths every day. We hear another myth, but quite often it's just a one-off. Someone's heard some bizarre thing on the internet, and we just get that one-off myth. But these ones that we're addressing here are ones that we get regularly. So we've probably heard 10,000 myths via our YouTube channel and all the comments and questions, but these ones that we addressed on this playlist are the ones that we hear the most. We hear these all the time. Is it true that it's illegal to be fat? Is it true to change your name to be a Japanese citizen? No, it's not true. It's a myth. Oh, anime. There's so many anime-related myths that we hear all the time. The main one is that a lot of people see stuff in anime and think it's true. And although there's some stuff in anime that's sometimes true, you know, Japanese people do eat rice, they do use chopsticks, you know, some stuff like that in anime is true. But really, you know, watching an animation and thinking that Japan is like that, sometimes they can be true, like Miyazaki and ones like that. There's a certain realism in the imagery sometimes, not when they've got monsters and stuff, but in the imagery of like the scene behind me you might see in an anime. So, but it's anime is as real. Japanese anime is as accurate as Hollywood's Disney movies are. You know, there's little elements of reality in there, but most of it's not. So lots of anime-related questions that we get that just no. You know, in anime I've seen this. Is it true? No. You know, it gets a bit bit tiring after a while. The other one related to that is that we see these big debates, and in the comment section, people have their own opinions in the comment section. If you see a comment in our comment section, doesn't mean it's true. And we won't necessarily argue it. If somebody makes a statement in there and says it's illegal to be fat in Japan, we won't necessarily make a comment about that. We'll just let it go. So just because you see it in our comment section doesn't mean it's true. Another one we get in there related to anime is often, anime is Japanese. Disney is not anime. And that's not true. Japanese people, if you show Japanese people a Disney movie and say, what is this? They'll say it's anime. Because anime comes from the English word animation. So any animation, any cartoon, any animation is an animation as far as Japanese people are concerned. So you can say Japanese anime or American anime if you want to separate them. But the people that argue, we see this all the time, people argue, oh, anime is only Japanese, Disney's not anime, it's not true. If you ask a Japanese person, you know, they'll tell you Disney is anime. So anime is only Japanese. No, it's not true. Any animation is anime. So if you want to separate them, you can say Japanese anime and American anime, or Japanese anime and Western anime, or something like that. If you want to separate them, so that's more accurate than to argue that it's only Japanese. Oh yeah, I've written here, if you see some super weird shit on the internet about Japan, don't assume it's common. So that's another one, is that the media love to pick up, and media in every country love to pick up on bizarre stories, and it appears that the media from outside Japan love picking up on little weird stories from Japan and running with it like it's normal. And we see this all the time. You get some little trend, you know, in Tokyo a while ago there was a trend that they'd inject, not Botox, but some like saline, I think it was, but inject into their forehead and make a shape like a bagel on their forehead. Just a bizarre thing, right? I mean, there's 127 million people in Japan. So if you get a couple of hundred of them, you know, which is a very small percentage, a couple of hundred of them do some weird shit like that, and that was a trend. They made these bagel shapes on their foreheads out of injected saline or something, just bizarre. But then what happens is the Western media pick up on that, and they run the story about this trend in Japan, and they make it sound like it's mainstream. And we get that all the time too. People say, is it true, you know, that Japanese people like to inject their foreheads with this stuff? And is it true that Japanese people like to have operations to make their eyes look more rounded? And is it true that, and this stuff is just, it's just stuff that the media pick up on, mainstream media and like internet media as well. And they run these stories, which are interesting stories, but the way they present it makes it sound as if it's really mainstream, as if everybody's doing it. You know, as if everybody's walking around Japan with a bagel on their forehead, or everybody in Japan's getting eye surgery, or everybody in Japan's, you know, going to cafes with train set. A lot of this stuff gets played up so much in the media that it gives the impression that it's really mainstream. So the point of this is that just because you see something in the media about some strange thing in Japan, just remember 127 million people in Japan. So if 100 of them are doing some bizarre thing, that's just 1/1,000,000th of the population. So it's the same as in our own countries. Just because you see, you know, there's some weird person, think of some weird person in your country that does some really weird shit, and then the foreign media pick up on that and try and make it sound like everybody in your country does that, you know, and it's just media sensationalism, and it's nonsense, most of it. So we get these all the time. You know, I saw this thing on the internet. I saw this thing on TV. Is that true? Do you see that all the time? And usually it's stuff that's really rare. We might have seen it ourselves on Japanese TV because it is rare. So the bagel thing was on Japanese TV because it is rare. It's unusual. Not everybody does it. So you don't believe, when you see something on the internet or on TV, don't believe it's mainstream in Japan. This is an important one for people coming here. For people coming to Japan, this is really important. Just because you do something or see someone else do something in Japan and nobody complains, it must be okay. And this is really common. We get this one all the time. So for example, we made a video and said, you know, best not to carry really big backpacks around the cities in Japan. And the other comment we made on that same video, it's on the how-to playlist, was don't use phones on the train. Don't talk on the phone on the train in Japan. Texting's normal here, but using the phone, actually talking on the phone or letting the phone ring in Japan is usually considered bad manners. And occasionally there'll be a sign up saying this, but usually there isn't because it's just accepted. So frequently what we get from that is people that have been to Japan, you know, for whatever period of time, have visited Japan, will put under the comment, this isn't true, I used a phone on the train all the time in Japan and nobody ever complained. So from that they're assuming that it was okay to do it. Or they'll say, I travelled on the train in Japan and I saw lots of people using the phone, right? So from that they're assuming that that means it's okay because there's people doing it. But if you think about what happens in your country with maybe old men peeing on the street, that happens here. Old men in Japan will often go off to the corner of a car park or go some on the street next to the gutter or something and pee, you know. And Japanese people just sort of ignore it because he's an old man and they sort of give him a bit of leeway. But of course it's the wrong thing to do. And it's the same as with using the phone on the train. You can get away with it. In fact, that video we made about it showed a foreigner using the phone on the train and nobody complained. But on that video you can also see the people on the train looking at him, you know, because it's not the cool thing to do at all. So the point of this comment is, just because you've done something in Japan and no one complained, or just because you see somebody do something in Japan and no one complains, doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. It's just the way Japanese society works, is they're not likely, you know, occasionally some old guy might say, hey, that's no good, don't do that, or someone might say, hey, don't use your phone on the train, maybe, but not likely. The way Japanese society works, the way society works, we've talked about this on the how-to playlist before, is that you're expected to be observant to what other people are and are not doing. So if 99% of the people on the train are not using their phones to talk on the phone, then we're supposed to be observant enough to realise that it's not on, you know. So that's the way they see it, is that we're not children, that we're adults, and that we should take responsibility for our actions, and we should decide what the right thing is to do based on what everyone else is doing. So if we do the wrong thing, it's not likely they will say anything. So if you're watching other people doing something, don't assume that it's okay to do it, you know. And if you do something and no one complains, don't assume that, oh, well, it must be okay, then I'll do it again. So we get that a lot. We get that a lot frequently, particularly on our how-to videos, where we suggest it's better to do this rather than this. There's always at least one person who says, that's not true. I was in Japan and I did that. I wore shoes on tatami floor, nobody complained. Yes, yeah, I'm sure. So yeah, that's a big one. That is a really big one. Just because a Japanese person doesn't complain about something that you're doing, don't assume that it's okay to do it, because they're just being polite and not saying anything. They're just letting you do it. So they will, we've talked about this before in our videos, they will let you, they'll give you enough rope and let you hang yourself. They'll let you do the wrong thing because they want to be civilized by not saying anything to you and drawing attention to your error. So they see it that if you do the wrong thing and they say something to you about it, that's uncivilized. So they're being polite by not saying anything, and you're just, you can be making a total dick of yourself, and nobody will tell you. So yeah, they're the top 6 myths of this week, but there's bound to be more. We'll keep making these videos because it's just endless. These myths just keep coming. They keep coming and coming, so we'll do another one of these soon. again, we all have a choice whether we follow these things or not. You can do as you want or believe as you want. These are just observations and suggestions based on what we see and hear and Japanese people's opinions here. So anyway, hope you found that useful. More videos coming soon.